mistaken. I understand what you're saying, and it's not that I disagree with Marcus's point about intergenerational homes, because I completely 100% agree with that being the model that we should use, because that would actually help rebuild the entire community. However, there's other factors we have to include, and you touched on the economics piece. Part of a push was we need to go to college. There was a huge push for that late 80s all the way through the 90s. And when you go to college and you get away from your home, you start experiencing other parts of life that you may not have even ever seen or knew was available to you. Now the next point is, well, once you graduate, you should bring that back home with you. That's fantastic and great, but the problem is during that transition, they move jobs out of that area. So unless you're some type of entrepreneur and that was your goal, you had to go where the job was. And if the jobs are not in your hood or in your community, yeah, you're gonna completely uproot. Once you uproot, now you're gonna meet a woman wherever for a man, you're gonna meet a woman wherever you now are, and you're gonna build your family from that 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 piece. Now, this is what I think, and this is going to be very hard, and a lot of people will disagree. But once you're at that point, and you're at the point where you're actually making decent money, that's when you try to move your people to where you are. You try to get them to you. But I don't know how many people have Southern families and Southern mamas and Southern grandmas. They don't want to leave where
They
they
would
are.
not leave.
They don't want you to spend your resources on them, even if it's not going to put you in a bind. So so like
And
when you look at, go
I
ahead.
would argue to add to that, AP. I think this is the new generation of grandparents, right? Not the grandparents that we once knew. Like my grandparents were old school grandparents. They're living their lives too.
That's a fact.
So they're not trying to be up under you and your husband.
But you're to me, I think the job then is to instill in your kids
Mhm.
that thought of that intergenerational home, and letting them know like how it needs to be built, so how you can keep all of the resources in the house, how you as what will be the grandparent, hey, I will watch your kids while you grow yourself. I will teach your kids the same way I taught you, because I'm now in a different phase of life, and you can still lean on me to help get you there. And then we can actually start that cycle. But again, we get back to the main point, the main issue with our entire community that HD touched on so eloquently earlier. We are too individualistic. Once our kids graduate and they're moving in their direction, we want to live our best life. We want to go do stuff that we never got the opportunity to do. And that's not the actual way to grow the community.
And you know
But
what?
that, that's
And
just
that's
me.
in everything we do, even when it comes to, like Mistaken was saying, you're in this relationship for a long period of time. Even when it comes to mating, everything it's about what can it do for me. I don't care what it can do for the partner, the person I'm with. It's all about how does this relationship business be? Everybody's out for the I. Nobody's out for the we. And that is the problem. Nobody wants to build together. They
You
just
you know how long it took me to come up with that this is that my there's a solution for that is the solution. I thought about all of these problems maybe 10 to 15 years ago, and everything kept pointing at that or something similar to that. I only like so let's just say you take my solution off the table. What about co-ops, family co-ops, where because I was looking at the average price of housing and I'm like, okay, so a studio in Chicago is about 1,300. That's a studio with no bedrooms. You know what I'm saying? 1,300. You got 9 people living in studios in various spots across the city. If you take those, well, I'll just say 10 for the ease of math. You take those 10 people paying $1,300 for a studio. If they were to combine the money, that would be $13,000. If they could combine that with some form of a credit score to get a mortgage, they could literally live in a huge mansion for $13,000 a month that they had the potential to own. And at the end of the payment of that, they could take a loan against the property to fund everything they need. They could, even if they just remove the interest in the property and used it for a family fund to fund the insurance for all the elders. Now, when somebody passes, they pay back the part they took out in insurance. It goes to the principal of the mortgage if there still is one. You still have ownership of a whole mansion, and we working together and moving forward. But nobody win when the family feud because everybody want to be an individual and everybody need a specific space, but they close enough. Like it's in this little room or a little box, right? That you got. And you could have been in a mansion, but you can't live with your cousin or your sister or your auntie because you don't like their attitude. We stupid. Like at the end of the day, this is stupid.
We gotta go to the next step. So go ahead and give us.
Or the other thing, you're in a 6-bedroom house by yourself.
Or that.
Right.
I enjoy peace sometimes.
If you see the show, you'll understand what I'm saying. So that didn't make sense to me either. You're in a 6-bedroom home by yourself, and we're talking about how we can make things better for your family, right? But I mean,
you see how I don't force the issue. I put the information out there, and if you can catch it, you can catch it.
Yep.
Not let it slide. Okay.
All right, you guys, we have another video. Did we have any more super chats? No. So let's move on to the next video, okay?
I have proof that racism is not a big deal in the US. Want to see it? Now hear me out. That is Taylor Swift with 21 Savage at the Grammys. That is a 31-year-old black man that grew up surrounded by an insane amount of violence and has made millions of dollars rapping about murder and selling drugs, with a 34-year-old white woman that grew up white picket fence wealthy and sings about high school love stories. And they look happy, don't they? Now, do you think Taylor Swift would ever take a picture like that with a dude that came from the same background as 21 Savage and still talks about how much murder and dope dealing he'd be doing, but homie makes $14 an hour working at Taco Bell instead of millions a year like 21 Savage? No. And she wouldn't do that whether he was black or white. Racism gets attributed to everything, and while this hasn't been a super serious video, it has a serious message. A rich white girl being so friendly with a black man that still gloats about things like murder shows that maybe classism is more prominent in the US than racism. Don't believe me? Grab a buddy of different skin color than you, walk into a fancy event, have the white guy dressed as a bum and the black guy dressed in a nice suit, and see who people distance themselves from.
What are your thoughts?
Now, I'm just going to say this, and you're not going to, with what he's talking about with his scientific test at the end, that's not actually how that's done. You got to do like and like. So you got a freshly dressed white man versus a freshly dressed black man. Then you see how they're treated. You do a bummy dressed white dude with a bummy dressed black dude. Then you see how they're treated. I understand what he's saying about classism. I get it. Oh, I get it. Because, yes, we treat, as a whole, when I say we treat people a little differently, oftentimes according to where they lie on the social hierarchy. I get that. Or on the social ladder, excuse me. But there's a very distinct difference on the advantages versus disadvantages of black versus white. So we can't ignore that and say it's more about classism. No, because when you go class for class, racism is highly prevalent. Like, we can't ignore that. But yes, classism does exist, and it's one of those things that has existed forever. That's not something new. Back in Roman times, there was like shit. You had slaves treated like vermin, right? Like, yes, classism absolutely exists, and that's not new. And I'm gonna start there and let my plane just simmer for a minute.